Jai Jagannath friends, I am your host BN Dash and today we shall be reading an article on Historical Perspective of Saint Poet Shri Jayadev. Article posted on Orissa Review, January 2004. Author Shri Ajit Kumar Tripathy is an IAS officer of 1973 batch Orissa cadre and a research scholar on Jayadeva. He has written 2 books on Kavi Jayadeva. The Ganga king ruled over Kalinga from the 6th century to 11th century AD. At that time, Kalinga was restricted by river Rusikulia in the north and Simhachal hills in the south. At the center of Kalinga was the Mahendragiri range of hills. The Mathar kings who ruled over Kalinga before the Gangas had Singhapur as their capital. But after the fall of Mathar dynasty, the Ganga kings established their capital at Kalinga Nagar on the bank of river Vansadhara. Today it is located in Srikakulam district of Andhra Pradesh known as Nagri Katak. Very close to this place is a place known as Mukhalingam in which the Madhukeshwar Siva temple was constructed in the 10th century AD by Madhukamarnava Deva, a Ganga king. His son Vajrahastha Deva did quite a lot of development works for the temple and laid down all the rites and rituals for worship of the deity. From copper plate issued by him, it is known that he had brought a number of families adept in dance from Badumba kingdom, which was the home of the maternal uncle of Vajrahastha Deva. These families gradually increased in number and the king settled them in a village called Sri Kurumapatak at the distance of 19 kilometers from Kalinga Nagar on the sea coast. There is a Vishnu temple there enshrining Sri Kuruma avatar tortoise incarnation of Vishnu. The Vaishnavites who came from southern India taught Sanskrit literature, philosophy and religious texts to the students in this place. There was also a school for music and dance at Sri Kurumapatak for the dancing girls and boys. The temple dancers were called Sunny. The Ganga kings ruled over Kalinga for about 400 years and then Chodaganga Deva was born to Maharaja Devendravarma Rajaraja Deva and Queen Rajasundari, who was the daughter of the Chola king of Kanchi named Maharaja Kulatunga Rajendra Chola II. Rajasundari had 2 sons, namely Chola Ganga Deva and Pamadi. When Rajrajara Deva died prematurely in 1077 AD, Chola Ganga Deva was only 5-year-old and Paramadi, the second son, was only 3-year-old. Kalinga was thus without a ruler. The neighboring states wanted to occupy Kalinga. In order to save the kingdom and the 2 kids from the enemies, Rajasundari, the widowed queen, desperately sought the help of her brother Virachoda, who was ruling over the Benji kingdom. Virachoda accepted the request, came to Kalinga Nagar and organized the coronation of the child Cholaganga Deva. He got his own kid daughter Gundichodi, later on known as Kascharakamodini, married to Cholaganga Deva and proclaimed that Kalinga was not without a ruler. Virachoda was a brave and intelligent king himself. He engaged teachers of high caliber for the education of his daughter and the son-in-law. Cholaganga Deva later led a huge army and started a series of campaigns against the neighboring enemy kingdoms. Situated to the east of Kalinga was Utkal, which was ruled at that time by the Somavansi king Karnadeva. Cholaganga attacked Utkal. With this battle for the conquest of Utkal, the Somavansa got eliminated. Cholaganga then defeated Chalukya king of Benji and also defeated Pala king of Bengal at Mandargada and Armyanagar, at present known as Arambagh. He extended his kingdom Kalinga from Godavari in the southwest to Ganga in the northeast. In 1112 AD, he shifted his capital from Kalinga Nagar to Varanasi Katak, which is at present known as Bidansi. From Diopara copper plate inscription, it is known that Vijayasena prided himself as a friend of Cholaganga. Since it took some time to bring about peace and stability in the conquered territories of Utkal and Vangar, Cholaganga along with his family stayed in Kalinga Nagar up to 1126 AD and then shifted to Varanasi Katak after restoration of peace and stability. In 1050 Sekabda 1128 AD, his first year of reign was declared to be counted as found from an inscription in Rusingha temple near Mukti Mandap at Srimanda. Cholaganga assumed the title of Parama Maheshwara, Parama Vasnava and Parama Brahmanya. He was initially a Seva and later on became Vasnava. His Seva Guru was a Sadhu in Madhukeshwar temple and his Vasnav Guru was from Vishnu temple of Kurumapatak. Cholaganga Deva organized the coronation of his eldest son Sri Kamanava Deva at Sri Purushottama temple of Puri and stayed in his palace at Puri for the rest of his life. This was in the year 1142 AD. Cholaganga Deva started the construction of the present Jagannath temple at Puri. At the coronation function, temple dancers from Sri Kurumapatak were called to perform dance at the Lord Jagannath temple. This sect was known as Sani sect. As found out from the temple inscriptions at Madhukeshwar Temple and Simanchal Temple, the Ganga kings had encouraged this tradition of temple dancers in the kingdom of Kalinga, and then in the Kalinga Empire. As recorded in an inscription in the Lingaraj temple, Bhubaneswar, during the reign of Raghava Deva, the second son of Chodaganga Deva, all the land rights for a region called Baheda Kanda were purchased from Sadhu Pradhan Jayadeva of Kurmapataka and donated to Kurtivaswar, Lord Lingaraj, by Madam Devi, her father Komi Naika and her mother. The three of them had donated 3 Akhanda Dipas, arrangements for non-stop burning of oil lamps, to the temple. They belonged to the Sani sect. A similar inscription appears on Madhukeshwar temple at Mukhalingam, where Komi Nayak, father of Madam Devi, and his wife Nagma Devi, title of Gudasani meaning temple dancer, arranged for offering an Akhanda Deepa in the temple in 1113 AD. There is yet another inscription in the said Madhukeshwar temple in which they had offered Akhanda Deepa in 1128 AD. The system of providing Akhanda Deepa and donating rights of land to the deities appears to be common in the three events in 1113, 1128, and 1156 AD. The presence of Jayadeva and his description as Kurmapataka Pravara establishes that he had close lineage with the dancing families of Kurmapataka who had come to Orissa during the period of Chodaganga Deva. Had the Gudi Sanis temple actors and dancers been socially looked down upon, then their donations to temples could not have been accepted and immortalized in inscriptions. The two inscriptions at Madhukeshwar temple and the one at Simhachal temple were discovered, read and interpreted by Dr. Satyanarayan Rajaguru, the Pitamaha Bhishma of historians and linguists of Orissa. Read with the inscription at Lingaraj temple. It leads to the conclusion that Jayadeva had been a member of the teaching faculty of the school at Sri Kurmapatak. He might have studied there as well. After his childhood education, he must have gone to Sri Kurmapataka and gained experience in composition of poetry and music and in dancing. He perhaps came back to Orissa along with the group and performed in the Puri temple. Shri Jayadeva, the celebrated poet of Gita Govinda, was born in the village Kenduvilwa Shasan or Kenjuli Shasan in Balipatna PS in Kurda district, a part of the earlier Puri district. He was most likely born in the first part of 12th century AD during the reign of Cholaganga Deva. Kenjuli Shasan, close to the river Prachi, then was inhabited mostly by Brahmins. The presiding deity in the village is Ambika, and there is a Rusingha temple as well. Jayadeva must have gone for higher education in Sanskrit literature and music to Kurmapataka, and after education he must have become a tutor there. That is why the two titles Kurmapataka Pravara and Sadhu Pradhan have been mentioned against him in the Lingaraj temple inscription. Read together, the three inscriptions indicate to the fact of close association of Jayadeva to the family of Komi Naikar and to the institution at Kurmapataka. Prachi Valley witnessed the rise and spread of Jainism, Buddhism, Saivism, Sectism, Sun cult and Vaishnavism. Kenduvilwa and many other villages nearby are full of religious monuments dedicated to different cults. Numerous temples were erected by Bhaumas, Somavanshas and the Gangas in the Prachi Valley. Village Kenjuli Shasan has rich relics of brick and stone temples and sculptures of Seva, Vaisnava and Sakta cults as well as Buddhism belonging to the period between 9th and 13th century AD in Prachi Valley. Whether the temple has a Sakta or Seva deity, Gita Govinda is recited on festive occasions which symbolize the influence of Vaishnavism over Sikhism and the immense popularity of the text of Gita Govinda. The copper plate grant of Rusingha Deva IV, which was recovered from a tank near the Rusingha temple of Kenjuli village, was originally issued from Varanasi Katak in AD 1383. It refers to establishment of Narasinghpur Shasan donated to one Mahapatra Narhari Das Praharaj, who was the minister of Narasingha Deva. This Shasan is located very close to Kenduvilwa on Prachi Valley. This grant also contains the names of Olatapura and Attahaspura Shasan adjacent to Kenjuli, established by Attahas Deva, the youngest son of Cholaganga Deva. To quote Dr. Harish Chandra Das, while discussing about the historical background of Jayadeva, it will perhaps not be out of place to glance through how he introduced Radha and Mahavar and Dasavatara cult in the most popular manner, breaking the stylized tradition. From this point of view, Gita Govinda is virtually a historical text unfurling the historical truth through his poetic narration. The cult of Madhava, which is historically proved to be in existence in Orissa from 7th or 8th century AD, gained great momentum from the time of Jayadeva. The first epigraphical evidence of Madhava we come across in the copper plate grant of Madhavaraja of the Salidbhava dynasty, where the scribe has particularized the epithet of Chakrayudha Madhava. The image of Nilamadhava installed by the Bhanja monarch at Gandhara d. 9th century AD comes next in order of chronology. The image of Santosa Madhava recorded to in the copper plate grant of Indravarman Kodaganga, Madhava in the pillar inscriptions of Relivalasa at Srikakulam, numerous Madhava sculptures and temples in Prachi Valley are clear revelation of the long-continued tradition of Madhava worship in Orissa with wide distribution in Prachi Valley, the birthplace of Jayadeva, who in course of his wanderings and is a devout worshipper of Madhava infused exuberantly in his Gita Govinda the lucid description of Madhava, his deity of love and admiration. Shri Jayadeva introduced the cult of Radha and Krishna through his Gita Govinda, and due to the influence of Srimad Bhagavata and Gita Govinda and the composite figure of Krishna and Vishnu as Gopinath became very popular in Orissa. When Vaishnavism became the state religion of Orissa, the composite sculpture of Krishna and Vishnu with upper two hands in the pose of playing the flute, standing in Tribhanga associated with Astagopi and cattle, which is the characteristic feature of Krishna, indicates the amalgamation of two cults at a time. The long-continued tradition of Dasavatara had a deep imprint on Shri Jayadeva, who popularized the 10 avatars of Vishnu in lucid language, which would be put to music and dance. To quote Dr. Harish Chandra Das again, that the concept of 10 incarnations of Vishnu was widely prevalent in Orissa since 7th century AD is substantiated by literary and archaeological evidences. In this connection, mention may be made of Varaha worship referred to in the copper plate of Dharmaraja of the Salidbhava dynasty and other individual and collective images, particularly in coastal Orissa, which speak in short the prevalence of Dasavatara worship in Orissa before the advent of Jayadeva. Jayadeva in his composition has shown the greatness of Lord Vishnu in his 10 incarnations individually. It was Shri Jayadeva who institutionalized the Devadasi system introduced from the time of Somavansi kings. Devadasis or Maharis were women dedicated to the deity in the temple for performance of dance and music. The importance of this dancing service became so great that a special structure called Natamandiya was added to the Viman and Jagamohan. Madhava Patnaik, a Vaishnavite poet, was a contemporary of Panchasakha and Sri Chaitanya. As is well known, Panchasakha refers to Balarama Das, Jagannatha Das, Achyuta Das, Ananta Das and Yashovanta Das, the saint poets of Orissa. Madhava Patnaik has described in detail the events in the later part of life of Sri Chaitanya in Puri. In this book is given a graphic description of the development of Vaishnavism in Orissa. The following are the facts from this book which clearly mentioned that I. Chodaganga Deva actually renovated an old temple and started construction of the present Jagannatha temple, and he had conducted in the temple itself the Abhishek of Crown Prince Kamanava Deva. On this occasion, dancers were called from the south to perform dance and drama in the Puri temple. A small Natamandiya was constructed and arrangements were made for presentation of regular dance and drama by Maharis temple dancers in the honor of Lord Jagannatha in the temple during the time of Chodaganga Deva and his son. I.V. Chaitanya, after he had arrived at Puri, was advised by Pandits to go to Rajamahendri to meet Raya Ramananda, who was governor of the southern province of Orissa. There Chaitanya came to know about Dvaitavada and Advaitavada from Raya Ramananda. Vipra Jayadeva was born in Kenjuli Shasan on the bank of river Prachi. He worshipped Madhava at Nayali. He was an expert in the Shastras and Puranas, music and dance. He was a saint poet who composed the Gita Govinda in the temple of Jagannatha at Puri, and his wife Padmavati danced to the tunes of Gita Govinda before Jagannath. Chaitanya and Panchasakha were going on Sankirtan trips to different parts of Orissa for a number of years. One such annual trip started from Ananta Vasudeva temple of Bhubaneswar and ended at Puri, touching Balakati Kenduliniyali, Madhav, Adaspur, Kakatpur and Konark. Madhav Patnaik has described as to how Sri Chaitanya and Panchasakha were dancing in Sankirtan singing Gita Govinda at Kenjuli village, which was the birthplace of Jayadeva. This book was discovered and compiled from 3 palm leaf manuscripts collected in Orissa from 3 places in the early 1980s. Gita Govinda of Shri Jayadev, therefore, is accepted as a historical text in addition to its great literary and religious significance. Shri Jayadev initially highlighted and systematized the traditional cults but also introduced his own ideologies, poetic imagery and music. Both Cholaganga Deva and his son Kamanav were disciples of Ramanuja and devotees of Sri Jagannath and his consort Lakshmi. Jayadeva was influenced by Ramanuja's ideology of Jagannath and Lakshmi. In Gita Govinda, Krishna tells Radha that formerly she as Lakshmi chose him as her consort on the seashore on the occasion of Samudra Manthana. As a result of this incident, Siva swallowed poison out of despair. Gita Govinda was composed before 1150 AD and Gita Govinda dance drama was enacted in Puri temple during the reign of Cholaganga Deva and Kamanavadeva. The earliest reference to Jayadeva outside Orissa was made by poet Chandabaradai, the court poet of Prithviraj Chauhan, who was defeated and killed in 1192 AD by M.D. Ghori in the Battle of Tirori. The next earliest reference is found in an inscription of Raja Sarangadev in the year 1201 AD. Therefore, it is established that Gita Govinda, because of its regular performance in Sri Jagannath Temple of Puri, assumed popularity throughout India within a brief period of 30 to 40 years of its composition. It combined the best in the rich traditions of philosophy, literature, music, and dance in Kalinga and Utkal. The philosophy was developed later into Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, so ably propounded by Raya Ramananda and accepted and immortalized by Sri Chaitanya, Pancha Sakha, and the Shad Goswamis. With this, we are concluding for today. Soon I shall be coming with another interesting article. Till then, take care. Jai Jagannath.